Good morning, fans of The Grueling Truth. It is James Ernest. We have David Sahadi. He is an Emmy Award winning TV producer and a major force in the world of professional wrestling. We're going to be discussing his new book, My Dad, My Dying Son, a tribute of love and legend to his dad, Lou Sahadi. So we are excited. David, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me today.
It is a pleasure. I was going to say, shoot, we love having authors on our show. And gosh, I mean, this is such a personal book. Uh, Thank you for joining us and discussing it with us today.
Yes, and again, it is very personal. It took me about 3 months to start writing it, and once I began writing, I finished that in 6 weeks because it meant so much to me, and the words just flowed so easily. And it has a unique concept in the sense that the odd number chapters, chapters one, three, five, etc., they all begin the day I brought my father home from the hospital. They're linear. And how he had no memory of me whatsoever, no memory of a lot of things. He slowly got better after spending 6 weeks in the ICU with a subdermal hematoma, and then he makes a full recovery, and then he gets cancer. So it's like a bad start, great, great comeback, and then the end. And the even number chapters are my father has authored 31 different sports books. So the even number chapters are one of his books condensed to 8 to 10 pages. And there's a common thread throughout each chapter. For instance, the first chapter ends, and I brought him home, and together we were hoping for a miracle. The second chapter is his book, The Miracle in Miami.
Oh,
So there's a
nice.
correlation throughout every
Yeah,
single chapter. It's like my words, his words, my words, his words. So it's a very unique format, and it's a very emotional book too.
I can imagine this book was quite a cathartic experience. How did it bring joy to you?
When I was writing about my father, just the love I had for my father brought me joy. And then when I was reading his chapters, I mean, I gotta be honest, I didn't read many of his books, but I read his books to find the 8 to 10 chapters I wanted to. And I'm like, wow, my father was such a great writer. I didn't realize that at the time. And we both have very similar writing styles. He rubbed elbows with people from all across entertainment, Cassius Clay, Joe Namath, um, Frank Sinatra, uh, the jockey for Steve Cawthon, the jockey for Affirmed, Peyton Manning, John Unitas. It was just amazing at all the people that he'd known and interviewed, and just he lived a wonderful life, and he worked hard for his children, and that meant the world to him, his children.
Definitely. I mean, he was a legendary writer, but he also, like you said, hung out with legends. You have a Muhammad Ali picture behind you. I understand that you had a pretty cool experience with Muhammad Ali.
That I've told that to very few people. Yes, the Fountain Blue Hotel. I was about 7 years old. My dad invited him over to his suite for an interview, and it was amazing because he picked me up and held me. And he's in real life when the cameras aren't on, he's a very, very laid back gentleman. Of course, when the cameras go on, it's like, I can float like butterfly, sting like a bee. And then the next day when we were flying back to New York, on Eastern Airlines, that's how long ago it was. That airline's no longer around. He put me on his lap in first class and told the flight attendant that I was gonna be staying with him during this flight.
Oh,
And they
that is
allowed that.
awesome.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, they go say no to Muhammad Ali. I mean, gosh.
Especially back then. They're not gonna,
Yeah,
it was more entitlement back then than it is today with all the restrictions.
that is awesome. Yeah, I was going to say, I can imagine between your experiences with professional sports and your father's, I mean, just the life that you all have lived and just how many interesting folks that you met.
Yes, gosh, Cookie Gilchrist, Joe Namath, Len Dawson, just so many. My dad lived a charmed life, but he worked hard for that. He came from humble beginnings, and he took me to 26 different Super Bowls.
Oh, wow.
And whenever he'd walk into a room or a hotel lobby or a restaurant, people like, Lou Sahadi, come over here, Lou, come over here. And to me, he was a rock star growing up, but he also inspired me. And that's why the title of the book is My Dad, My Dying Son, spelled S-U-N. And there's a reason for that because not only was he the son and the mentor and the light in my life, but as he got older and I started to help, had to take care of him financially in other ways, in many ways, he became my son, S-O-N. And I enjoyed taking care of him. I really did up until the day that he left us. He lived to be nearly 93 years old,
Oh,
and
wow.
I would cry for so long. So did my sisters. I cried on the anniversary of his death a couple of months ago. And then my younger brother gave me some wisdom. He said, instead of crying that dad's gone, why not be happy that we had him for almost 93 years? That's rare. And I said, John, that changed everything for me. Thank you for saying that. I know it's going to be a sad day on Father's Day next week, but I'll get through it.
Now, you mentioned Muhammad Ali not being, such a outrageous person in person. I
Yes.
think it's kind of interesting because, of course, with your background in professional wrestling, I understand the reason why Muhammad Ali was the character that he was is because of Gorgeous George.
I think so too. And you can almost say that he, well, Gorgeous George was the exception, but he was like a wrestling character before wrestlers became characters, except for a few like Gorgeous George.
Mhm.
And that was awesome. He had a great personality when the cameras are on, very soft spoken and just a gentle man when the cameras are off.
How did your dad make you the man that you are today?
Oh, by inspiring me and wanting me to be him. He never forced me into anything. So when I graduated college, I didn't know what I want to do for a year, but I knew that I love TV and I love sports. And my dad got me a job at NBC Sports as an intern a year later. And it's like, wow, sports, television, I love this. And because I loved what I did, and it's advice I give people that are young that don't know what they want to do in life, I ascended so fast because I loved what I was doing. I was in a field that I truly, truly enjoyed and had a passion for. And he encouraged me along the way without pushing me or forcing me to do anything. And that was very important too. He guided me and suggested, but he never said, do this or do that. Of course, I'd always seek his counsel whenever I had a question about something, but he just did that in such a gentle way where it was, a guidance, but not a demand.
Your father has an amazing background. Tell us a little bit about that, how he was able to achieve so much from humble beginnings.
Yes, my dad was born of immigrant parents, so he's a first generation American, and they lived in Brooklyn in a very poor area. And the first memory that my father has of his father was the police breaking down the doors and beating him with wooden sticks. They broke his bones, they bloodied his face, all because he was making bathtub gin during Prohibition. So while he was away for a couple of months, my grandmother, his mother, there wasn't much money for food. So after about a week, she had to go around the neighbors and ask for food, ask for potatoes. And my dad would go days without eating. And he only told me this story once because he didn't want it to define him, but he rose above that because he had a passion and he had a drive and he had a desire. So he came from very oppressed and humble beginnings and became this guy who authored 31 books and was the most prolific sports writer for nearly 3 decades. He published four periodical magazines each month. One was pro wrestling scene, pro boxing scene, pro football scene, and NBA scene. And he would write 4 to 5 articles in each of the magazines. He just worked day and night, not only because he loved what he was doing, but he wanted to take care of his children. He wanted them to have a better start to life than he did. And for that, I'm forever, grateful. I'm blessed that I had a man like my father that was my dad.
So, how was he able to overcome that adversity?
He got a scholarship to Marshall University. I'm not exactly sure how. He studied journalism, started writing for a local newspaper there, and just people started to recognize him. And then he kept on aspiring to go higher and higher and higher. And next thing you know, he was writing press releases for so many different sports. Um, Started publishing his own magazines. He took a gamble on that. His first magazine was called Quarterback Magazine. And it was a very well produced magazine. It was like Sports Illustrated back in the day. It was
Oh,
thick,
wow.
everything was glossy, and that lasted for about 7 years. And then he went over into the monthly periodicals. And man, he just, amazing. Again, reading his words for the first time in these books and these articles just simply blew me away at the experience that he had and the loving man that he was, because you can't find a person that would ever say a bad thing about him. And that's a tribute to his character,
So,
as well as
tell,
to mine. I want to be like him.
oh, definitely. So, tell us a little bit more about his writing style.
He paints a phenomenal picture. He'll start a chapter and he'll describe the skies, the wind, the temperature, what was around. So when you're reading his books, you feel as if you were there. And that's very important that you feel like you're there in that environment because then you get sucked into the story that he's about to tell.
I under
He writes with great prose, and he knows how to do short sentences and long sentences and short sentences and wherever appropriate.
nice. So
Yeah.
kind of being able to mix it up when needed.
Yes.
Excellent.
Yes.
I understand that your writing style and his writing style has some similarities, but some big differences.
The book My Dad, My Dying Son is a real life story with his writings. Most of my books are fiction, and I write with a lot of prose, and I also write with a lot of imagery as well. So again, like my father, you can tell in the first, paragraph where you are, what it looks like, the color of the sunset, the trees, the road. Um, but it's a little deeper than my dad's is. And he even proofread my first book, which is called Last Call of Gods. He was like, wow, son, you write on a different level than I do. I said, Papa, it's different, but it's not better. He goes, you are really deep. And I said, that's okay. Your stuff is very wonderful, what you write as well, too. We're just two different styles of authors. So I would say that's the biggest difference. Prose, fiction, painting pictures. I want everybody to see or feel what my characters look like and what they're thinking, what they're wearing, and all that.
I really enjoyed how you designed the book by alternating the chapters between yours and his work. I mean, I really feel that shows an insight into him as an individual, not just,
Mhm.
the later years, but just to be able to understand his perspective, it sounds like.
Yes, and here's one interesting thing. With the threads, when I was first writing his chapters, I didn't have a rhyme or reason where they're going to go. And I said, there needs to be a thread. And I'll give you one example. Chapter 3 is his fifth day home from from having the head trauma, the subdermal hematoma, still not aware of where he was. He thought he was in New York. He rarely spoke after the first day. He spoke a lot. And then when I brought him home, he just got very quiet. He just observed things and look at things. And I said, he loves Frank Sinatra. Maybe I should play some Frank Sinatra. And sure enough, I played Frank Sinatra while we were having dinner, and he starts to sing lines along with Frank. And I'm like, wow, that's the first sign that his memory might be coming back. That's what we call in wrestling a hope spot.
Yeah.
And I said, we all had one because of Frank Sinatra. He had given me a hope spot. And the next chapter was Frank Sinatra, Bruno Sammartino's real life manager. And he paints this great picture of hanging out with Frank at his favorite restaurant called Gizzy's. And it was just awesome when I decided to have a thread between each chapter. So they all make sense. Here's another one. The night before he was going to die, when he was put in crisis care with hospice, she said it's only a matter of time right now. And they got the morphine over there. And my sister and I were so devastated. It's like he was ready to go, but we weren't. That's how that chapter ends. The next one is when he interviewed Vinny Pastore, The Sopranos. He goes, how did it feel when you're written off the show, Vinny? And he goes, nobody wants to die. And it's just like, so there's always that thread. So it feels as though my dad's writing along there with me. I know this might sound weird, but I actually felt like when I was writing, I felt his hands guiding my hands and my fingers as I
Oh,
was typing.
that is awesome.
Yeah. And as you said, it was a great catharsis. I was very depressed for 3 months. I didn't do anything stupid. I wasn't drinking or anything like that, but life seemed to lack joy for a while. And then when I started writing this book, it just completely got me in a different headspace. And I was so happy to be writing about my father.
People think with your father's background that this would be a book about sports. Why is this more a book about life, love, and the connection between a father and a son?
So it's ultimately the story about a relationship between two people. In this case, my dad and myself. It could be between anybody that loves somebody as much as we loved each other, a husband and a wife, a mother and a child. My dad and I had such a special relationship, and everybody would marvel at that when we were together. They're just like, wow, you and your dad are really close. I'm like, yes, he's my best friend, and I'm his best friend. And we talk all the time. And again, people even said I'm envious, but not in a bad way. I never had a relationship with my father like you had with yours. And that really made me feel good. And it's just like he was my best friend, he was my mentor. Um, he was everything you can want in a man, and I can probably say he was the greatest father that ever lived.
Wow,
I know a lot of people can say that about their dads, but I really feel as though he was the greatest dad I could ever have. And that's why his passing hurt so much.
definitely. Well, we're sorry for your loss.
Thank you.
Welcome. Um, It has been a pleasure having you on the show today, learning more about your father, learning more about the book. Where is the best place to get the book? And then where can we find out more about you on social media and on the web?
Amazon.com. You can Google David Sahadi books, or you can Google when you get on Amazon the title, My Dad, My Dying Son, SUN. And I'm all over Wikipedia and the internet. So if you want to find out more about me, just Google my name in Wikipedia and you'll see a lot about my biography.
It has been a pleasure having you on the show today. Thank you for joining us.
It's been my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate you.